Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's episode, Ask Me Almost Anything. And the first question will be, how do you know when to give up on a project? My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Executive Everything of Writing for Screens, a channel that I have set up to try and pass on some tips and tools and techniques and insights that I got during a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. Now, on my way out of the business, I am going to try and leave behind a bunch of things on this channel in case they are helpful to you. There is no system, there is no absolute right or wrong, there's just things I figured out that I wanted to try, see if you like them, if they help you, use them, if they don't, get rid of them. That'll help you know what you don't want to do. Every single artist has to figure out their own path, their own way. Everyone has to work out their own goals and style and way of working. That is my big message to you, that part of the job of artists is learning what you want to do and how you can do it for yourself, your way. So, in order to do that, I have set up this page. Here's a little screen grab of my channel front page. And if you notice down at the bottom, there's some playlists. The first three of those playlists are called Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. These are full of 10-minute lessons. Each one is just 10 minutes, jam-packed full of thoughts, ideas, things to try, tips, tools, skills. That's what it's all about. You don't have to look at them in any order. You don't have to do them, any of them. Just take a look, because each one is on a topic. The topic is not just the title, but the thumbnail, a nice big word like character or dialogue or exposition. And if you read them, you can choose, sort of like going through a recipe book and finding the recipes, seeing which ones you like. I'm going to do a bunch of hellos now. Hello, T, Trent, and Darian, and Jas, Paul, and Sonia, Helene, and... Helene and Pelicans and Michael. Oh my gosh, lots of good friends here. Najo, hey, Burgundy, hello, and Donna. Everyone, everyone seems to be good. Hi, Jean, and your many friends at the ward. Okay, let's get started, because I got a couple of topics I want to talk about here, and I actually worked it out and thought it out and made a little presentation. Hello, Michael. It is very nice to meet you. Greetings to France. We're going to do a couple of topics that I have pre-arranged. Then I will open it up to ask me stuff. Right now, let's talk about this first topic. How do you know when to give up on a project? A lot of people ask me this. And I want to just first talk about the concept of things that you can't ask other people. The basic idea here is that there are what I like to call balances. Balances are things that are never going to be resolved. A balance is something where there's two elements to it and they're tied together. Neither one even exists without the other. So you're never going to solve it and get the right answer. You are just going to recognize that there's these two things and both of them are part of this question. And all you have to do is figure out where you are on that scale, on that spectrum, on that teeter-totter. That's what a balance is. In this case, the balance is persist and let go. In other words, how much do you stick with it and how much do you say, no, I'm going to just drop this and go something else. Now, I want you to notice, very important, the answer is let go, not give up. Give up suggests that there's a thing you're supposed to do and you're failing. Whereas let go means recognizing that there's a thing that you've decided not to do, to choose not to do it, just as you choose to persist. It is always a matter of choosing, not of getting it right or figuring out the right thing to do. You need to figure out the right thing to do for you at that moment, at under those circumstances, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to make that choice, but recognize it's always going to be a choice, and there's never going to be a completely right answer. It is always a balance, and you have to accept that and get comfortable with it. Hello, Carpe Diem. Carpe Diem Doom. I feel like a bad student is not going through. Yeah. How come you haven't gone through the 400 hours? No, there's lots of titles. There's lots of stuff to look at. I hope one day when I have all the time in the world to go through some of those big hour-long things and break them into littler topics. Because the truth is, some of them, there's piles of different topics. Okay, let's get to this one. The main thing is, obviously, there is no standard answer. You can't say, oh yes, after 12 drafts, that's when you let go. Or when you feel this way, that's when you let go. No one knows. It's always changing. It's always changing for everyone. There's not even a right answer for you. There's a right answer at this moment under these circumstances. I have been working on this novel I'm working on for over 20 years. You would think I would have given up, and I often did, but I have to tell you, I am now getting to it and figuring it out. It's suddenly, after all these years, and I swear I worked hard on this when I was working on it, couldn't get it, couldn't figure it out. Weirdly, it never occurred to me to not write it. I know it's the right thing to do. I just couldn't figure out how to do it. So, is 20 years the right amount of time to let go? Is 20 drafts? Is what the only way that you can answer these questions is within the full picture of your life and work. It will depend on how many other things you've given up, how many other things you want to do, why you're giving up, what it is that you're letting go of. These are all things that you have to take into account. There is not an actual answer. So the first thing to recognize is your responsibility as an artist to make a choice. I can tell you that for me, I give up on, or I set aside a lot of projects. In the decades that I have done that, I have begun to regret some of it because there are some unfinished things that I now can't show to anyone that were cool, and I wish I had finished them. That's something for you to consider if you're starting out. On the other hand, a lot of these things that I took on were simply too big for me to do. I didn't know how to do them, and I didn't have a process by which to do them. I wish I had learned more. I wish I could start now. I wish I could have my 40 years of learning how to do this as my education so that I could then start and have another 40 years to use that. I don't. Part of the reason I'm doing these videos is to do something with all this wisdom I figured out too late. Okay. Alex says, I turned on notifications, but I didn't get one. I am sorry. That's on YouTube. I don't understand it. I certainly tried to notify everyone. I pushed the button that said I'm on. Okay. So, Burgundy has a comment on this. Giving up needs time. You can take a break from a project, but if you still think about the idea long afterwards, it may be for a reason. If it feels unfinished or unfulfilled, you shouldn't give up. I'm done. Burgundy does my job for me. Burgundy is always doing my damn job for me. Yes, that's very much one of the things that I'm going to talk about. So let's just read it again. You can take a break from a project, but if you still think about the idea long afterwards, it may be so for a reason. If it feels unfinished or unfulfilled, you shouldn't give up. Very, very good point. And one of the things I want to talk about that is the simple answer. There is a difference between giving up on it and setting it aside for a bit. And you have to decide which one of those questions you're wrestling with. I have set aside this novel for years and years at a time. That's not giving up. And you shouldn't give up. If you decide to let something go, it's because you are choosing to move on to something that you feel is a better choice and you can't do both, or that you've changed. And we'll talk about that. You may change. These artistic processes take a long time, and you're very likely to change. The person who starts a project is not really the same person who finishes it. Good afternoon, Larry. Thank you. I appreciate that MC squared. Than you. Than me. I knew it was okay. Michael says, if I see it, it will come. Yes, very much the case, actually. After I give up, but my mind doesn't stop working on the project, does that happen to others? Yes, and that's what Burgundy was just saying. If you have given up, let something go, but you can't let it go, that it keeps on sticking to your mind, you should consider that. Maybe sort of put make two separate piles. One is things you genuinely have let go of, and others that you can't seem to figure out or can't work out the mechanics to get done, but you're not giving up on it. And it's very useful to have that. Okay. So let's continue with some of these thoughts about setting it aside versus giving up or letting go. So let's talk about the biggest question. What is the reason that you want to let it go? What is the reason for giving up on a project? This is the most important question. This is it. You have to think about, why do I want to let it go? Let's talk about some of the possible reasons. There's always going to be a lot. But only give up on a project, only let go of a project for a reason specific to that project. In other words, I've sometimes thought of something and simply, it was too big. I often think of things that are too ambitious. And sometimes it will be like, this will take 10 years, and I don't want to work on it for 10 years, or I just am not able to, because the 10 years I need to do other things. So therefore, that's a specific reason to the project. Or I have chosen to do this, but the truth is, in the current cultural climate that I am intending to try and sell it, it is not going to be popular, and I will actually have a problem because of it. That's a legitimate reason to let something go, to say, as much as I want to do a pirate movie, I just don't think I can get it sold. And I don't feel a driving need. It's just something I'd like to do. You have to think about a specific reason why you are giving up, if you are going to give up. If that reason is fear of failure or doubting that you'll get a result, don't give it up. In other words, if you say, I don't think a pirate movie can work, but that pirate movie is something you really love and you think is great, don't give it up for that. Because you don't know. For all you know, the pirate renaissance is about to begin. And fear of failure, that's going to attend to everything. Everything you do has the possibility of failure. One of the best things you can try and do is not worry about whether or not it's going to fail or not. Make it so that doing it is the success and not worrying about the result. However, the main thing I'm trying to get to here is, if you are letting something go because you just feel scared it's not going to be good enough, don't stop. Don't let it go. That's not a good reason. You can't tell how good something is going to be until you've done it. And it's worth doing. Unless for some reason you had like an absolutely positive proof that the other thing you were going to do is going to be good. But usually if you're afraid of failure, you're going to continue to be afraid of failure. If you can't figure it out, keep trying. Or if you, as I often do, maybe set it aside, but don't give up on it. Don't say, I'm going to throw this away. Do not do that. However, if something has changed, if you or the world has changed, and this has happened to me often because I take so long to write things that the world literally changes, and the situation, I had this really great idea for an epic story which involved the toppling of a massive skyscraper in a New York-like city, which was a wonderful story to tell until 9/11, at which point it no longer was a fairy tale. It was no longer an innocent story that I wanted it to be. A story that was going to be so clearly make-believe that I could explore this tragedy. When the actual tragedy happened and changed America, it no longer felt appropriate to tell that story. So something changed, and I had to let it go because it was just no longer a good story to tell, even though I personally love it. The other thing that can happen is, and this happens a lot, especially if you are learning as you are going, which we always are, you may just change while you're working on it to the point that either you no longer feel the thing you felt when you were inspired to do it, or your skills or knowledge have changed in such a way that you say, oh, I now see why that's not a great idea. That's essentially immature of me to have done that way. So if something in you or in the world has changed, then that's a legitimate reason to ask the question. It is not always a great reason to stop. Sometimes, even if you've changed, you should finish what you're doing. But the point is that at that point, you need to make a choice, a conscious, I am choosing. It's not like this is inevitable. It's not like this has to be let go of. You're just saying, I think it's probably better for me to do it or not do it. Another reason, I see a lot of your comments. I will get to them soon, but I do want to keep up with this, make a nice, concise, cool video here. If you don't feel it, if the reason that you want to let it go is because you don't feel it, the big question you have to ask is, does this happen a lot? If you find yourself often getting into a project and then losing your feeling for it, you have to deal with that. If that happens because you genuinely no longer like the project, that's fine, but that won't happen every time. If every time you are working, you feel the absolutely normal highs and lows of inspiration, you feel, I really kind of don't love doing this, that is not a good enough reason to give it up, because you'll never finish anything that way. That's a reason to think about the question of, why am I not inspired? Possibly you're not inspired because sometimes the work is not fun. And you may not be used to that yet. You may not be used to the fact that there is a fair amount of drudgery or craftsmanship involved in art. It's not just following the muse and only going where the feeling takes you. Sometimes you're operating by craft. So one thing I will say is, if you are doing something that you should be doing, you will at least sometimes feel it. You will have a certain feeling when you think about this project. If you're feeling, I really want to make that work, but it's just too hard or something, take seriously that I want to make it work. I see it. I get it. I feel it. That is an important thing to take seriously when you are weighing your balance. That is on one side of that balance. So think about that. The other thing about it is, if you do feel that, you'll probably feel it again if you keep working. And the more you work, the more you will feel it. Okay, let me take a quick moment here to get to some of these comments. Hello, Serenef. I am so glad. Hello to Italy. Buongiorno or bon nuito. I don't know the Italian words, but good evening to you. I am very glad that you are here live. Kafka says the art of failing beautifully. Kafka is the failing, never giving up. A video that Carpe Diem Doom liked. Okay, cool. That's okay, Burgundy. Good to have you as my other voice. His books are like that failed and unfinished pursuit. Yeah, there are many artists who can't look at their own work, can't reread their own work, can't finish their work. Yes, try to be the one who does. Just remember, every day is a new opportunity to try again. That's all I can say. There is no particular better thing out there most of the time. And the most important thing to try and do is, unless there is a specific thing in your story. For instance, I once had a script that I loved, and I wrote like most of the full draft of it. I worked for a year or two on this thing and got great material on a thing that was sort of an action thriller, but also sort of a character drama. And I could never get the fact is, my interest in having it undercut its action genre ruined the action genre. This was 10, 15 years ago. The truth is, now there probably is a way to do it. But at the time, I didn't see a way to reconcile the two impulses. Basically, the action movie and the non-action movie in my head were fighting. I could not figure out which one I really was doing. So I set it aside. And that, I don't feel that was a mistake. I just feel like, damn, there was a lot of good work put into that. All right. Michael says, it took me a month to write 10 pages. Yes, there are some people, sometimes you write fast, sometimes you write slow. That's not a good reason to let something go. If it's going slowly, but it's going, and you want it to be done, you should definitely consider it. Continue it. Okay. Sonia says, I have made a folder for not now projects. I can't give up on them, but they are not right for me now. Knowing they're still there calms my mind so I can work on the now project. Sonia is telling you good stuff. Please take this seriously. It is a very important thing to do, to try to create a place where you can keep the work and sometimes even work on material that you may not really be ready to commit fully to. That's a good thing to do. Having a what I call a scrap pile is a very, very good thing. I did a video on this called Brainstorming and Scrap Piles. You might want to take a look, because I discuss in detail this concept of making a place to keep whatever you create, whatever it is. And you never know. Sometimes you'll take a piece of something that you couldn't finish and you'll use it in something else. But if you throw it away, you can't do that. Yuli, well, you have to decide whether or not you want to let it go. I hope that these thoughts are useful. No, you don't have to shut up. All good. Yes, also, see, Burgundy, damn, I ought to be taking Burgundy on as a partner sometimes. Remember why you want, like, what is it? What's that thing that made you like it in the first place? That probably is unchanged. That probably is as good as it always was. There is something weirdly resonant and permanent about those things that inspire you. It is unusual to look back at something that inspired you and go, I don't care. Usually you'll be like, oh, well, that's a long time ago. I may have changed, whatever. But do take seriously the importance of feeling it. As I said, you will, at least sometimes, feel it. So don't let not feeling it be determining to let it go, because you may not feel it for a moment and then go back to it. Don't let something go because of that. I've let go of my most recent stories because they tend to grow to novel size. As I outline, I don't know how to stop that from occurring. Yeah, no, that's me too. My problem is I simply think of more things than I can do. Like, as a practical matter, I think of things that are longer, bigger, and I think of more of them than I can honestly do. And one of the best things that I have tried to learn to do is to learn to estimate how much work something would take. Because when I first think of it, I think, oh, I could just plunge in and get that done. And the truth is, most things I do take years. So it's not a matter of, do I want to do it? It's a matter of, do I currently prioritize this as the thing most worth spending years on? Okay. As Burgundy says, is it something that you can still get behind, that original inspiration? Maybe you've changed perspective on the subject. Time changes people and ideas. Yes, it is an absolutely legitimate question if you have changed. That doesn't mean you should necessarily give up. Sometimes sometimes you're going to do work that was started by another version of you, and there's a certain loving nostalgia to finishing that thing, even though you are no longer that person. That's cool. Alex says, my shirt is going over well. Thank you. Hi, Ricky. I gave up on a novel first because someone else did it and did it better. It was humbling. That's a tricky one. Unless if they did it better and you genuinely felt like yours was unnecessary, that is cool. But truthfully, there is nothing you are going to do that no one has ever done. It's really more a question of how you are going to do your version of it. But yes, it does. I have had ideas that I'm like, somebody else did that. I don't feel like mine is particularly exciting anymore. Hello, Lake Filter. Okay. Leonard Kuhn says, how do you deal with that fear that the world might change in a way that's an interesting question, how it invalidates your story or that someone else tells a story too similar to yours? Well, there is nothing, in other words, trends or similar projects. There is nothing you can do about the possibility that you will work on Moby Dick for 10 years and that the 9th year someone else will put Moby Dick out. It's possible. It's unlikely. If your thing is beaten by a trend, just be grateful because in many ways people often like trends. They'll be like, ooh, now that there's a whaling story that was very popular, we need more whaling stories. So that actually can help you as far as trends go. If you are working on a trend, for instance, I was working for many years on a romantic comedy in the 1990s. At which point, and that's just because I love romantic comedies. Romantic comedies had a short death period. There was a period there where just nobody wanted to make romantic comedies. I finished that one because it was just good. And what if somebody wanted a romantic comedy? Or what if the trend changed? It's like now I probably, if I was still in the business, could shop it around. The answer is sometimes you can't live in fear. That's the short answer of any question about fear. Fear is a terrible reason to make decisions artistically. Rationally balancing out whether or not something is worth the risk, yeah, there's a certain amount of reason that goes into that. I would just say, remember, everything is a choice, and every choice has a price. In other words, you can say, I'm going to choose to do something that's in a genre that is not currently trendy, or is in a trend that might end. Just recognize the consequences of maybe not, you may have to put it out in another form. You may have to turn it into a play or a novel or a comic book. But I would say don't drop things because of fear. As I said here, if your reason for letting something go is fear of failure, don't. I personally think that's not a legitimate reason because you'll always have the possibility of failure. Okay. Hi, Doreen, and me with all my ends. How are you doing? I feel I'm betraying my project when I become desperate and start forcing words on the page. That's when to let it go. I would not say that because you're talking to someone. I've never had to anything that I've written that I haven't forced some of the words onto the page. You can always make those forced words better later. Also, honestly, no one knows the difference between a forced word and a not forced word if it works. Nobody knows how you felt when you wrote it. Nobody knows whether you loved it when you wrote it. I have written things which I hated, sometimes on assignment or sometimes just in order to get through something. In the long run, it will be fine. There is no detection for your emotions in the finished work. We would like to think that there are, but there aren't. You'll know the inspiration, the creativity comes and goes. If you wait until you're feeling creative and happy to write, you'll probably never write anything. Work is hard, yes, and also work is work. In other words, while creative work is creative, it's also work. It's also partly forced or technical or compromised. All these things happen. It's very cool that you can express it in such a strategic way. Good. I'm glad if that is helpful. That is good. I want to do, hi Matthew. I want to take on another related topic here before it is too late, because what happened was when I originally answered this question about when to give up on something, it's partly because I misread a comment or it was an email. And I'm going to give you now that email so that you can take a look at it and see. Here's the deal. I'd love to hear someday your thoughts on throwing out ideas that aren't working. Not getting married to any one idea until you're very far along, if ever. I'm curious as I've pivoted multiple times over the last months, but finally found my story, which has like 10% of the original idea from months ago. So basically, this was about persisting. This was about being flexible and creative and having an idea which changes as you work on it, which is very different from, in fact, opposite of letting it go. But for some reason, I just clung to that first section about throwing out ideas that aren't working. And I just was like, oh, let me talk about that, the idea of throwing things out. And I didn't answer the real question. So I want to also answer that. That was from AGP back in April of last year. So thank you for that question. By the way, it's very important. The balances, when we talk about feeling or reason, there's not a right or wrong. It is not that either one will solve your problem. You have to recognize that every creative choice is a mixture of craft, technique, reason, strategy, all those things, the business. And then feeling, which is all those creative, impossible to describe, emotion-based things that make you choose one thing over another or want to do one thing over another. Neither one of those is going to fully operate all the time. Almost always, even if you are on a rush of feeling, your craft will be working with it. And sometimes, as we just said, your feelings will be nowhere to be found, but you can still do the craft part. It is a balance that you must never think of as being resolved. The balance is, all balances are eternal. They are a combination that you must figure out your proportions as you go. Okay, so let's talk about this concept of how things change and how much can you let them change. And the answer obviously is almost always. Anything is open to that question. Can it change? Could I do without it? Could I change it into another thing? That's fine. I believe that at a certain point you have to make choices. I believe that art is making choices. I think I actually wrote that down somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, I got to organize my little slogans here. Anyway, art is making choices. Art is saying, at a certain point, I'm going to say that this is the ending, or this is the twist, or this is the character, and you're going to stick with that. In the business, in the industry of entertainment, nothing is ever impossible to change. They are willing to change everything. There is a constant flood of suggestions to change things. That's actually bad. You should be open to changing things, but there's a philosophical concept called the ship of Theseus, which is basically, what if you had this great big wooden ship and over hundreds of years, because it was ritually used, you had to replace pieces of this ship. You had to put a new board on the deck or a new board in the hull. And slowly but surely, every single board and nail of this ship was replaced because it's hundreds and hundreds of years old. Is it the same ship? That's a philosophical question which I cannot possibly answer. That's the whole point of philosophical questions. But the concept is worth thinking of, which is, if your ship of Theseus is being changed with different parts, in other words, every time you change a little bit, at a certain point, nothing will be left of the original. And this happens often in the American film industry, and it's pretty ugly because now and then you'll find that a new thing came out of an old thing and was cool, but the old thing is gone. I believe that unless somebody's paying you a ton of money, it is very important for you to say there's certain things that you're going to choose. Okay? You want to choose something, or a few somethings that are the core of the work, which you will not change, which everything else is making work. If you want to change those things, you probably should just do a new thing. Just start a different thing. Don't try and turn one thing into another thing. But if that thing that you are starting radically changes, but the core thing, whatever it is, may be a character, it may be an idea, it may just be a cool, way of making chase scenes, whatever it is. If you're like, okay, I'm going to do a whole movie because I figured out a way to do chase scenes where the camera is, spinning around, and then you build a whole story around that, cool. And that story could change a lot of ways, but the chase scene concept stays the same. That's still the core of the work. That is not the ship of Theseus. So, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about something I did. It's very possible to even have something, especially in the film industry, where you finish the work, you get it right, you get it to the point where this is as good a script version as you can make, and then you then change it radically after that because people come in with other desires, or you even change. There was a novel. I'm going to talk about this another time, but there's a novel called An Obedient Father by Akhil Sharma. I've never read it, but I read a lot about its publication because it was this guy's first novel. Akhil Sharma wrote a book called An Obedient Father. It was very, very, very highly regarded. It was really quite the thing for him as a breakthrough novel. 22 years later, 20 years later, he thought about it. And he felt, and he's done a lot of interviews and stuff about this process that he went through. But he said, I feel like I didn't get it right. I no longer agree with what it says. He rewrote it. He rewrote the whole novel and published it. There are now two versions of this novel by this guy named Akhil Sharma. The first version is called Obedient Father. I'm not sure what the second one is. But the point is, you can actually have the desire to reapproach your work decades later. That would be a normal creative impulse. The answer is, for me, if you are changing and changing and changing to the point that there is no center, there is no reason that you are making choices, you should stop and make a choice to have something that you will stick with. I think it's very important to choose something or a few somethings that are the core of the work, that it would be better to just do something different entirely than do this without those things. Sometimes in the business, you're not allowed to do that. I had this case where I wrote a script called The Burning Angels. Well, it was called Headshots originally. And it was a very, very unusual structure. Because what it was there was a woman, she was a schizophrenic woman who hears a murder in the next apartment. She lives in an apartment building. There is a shooting in the apartment next to her. So she is a witness and she sees the killer. The killer is a policeman. She is very, very vulnerable because she's schizophrenic. She hears things and she's not often in control of herself. So she goes for help to somebody that she knows tangentially who tries to help her, reluctantly takes on helping her. So these two people who have their own struggle are against this police officer who committed the murder and knows she's a witness, but the murder was an accident. However, his supervisor, his sergeant, wants to cover up the crime so as to protect the police officer and the police in general. And so therefore the authority figure over the killer is pressing. So you have these two pairs of characters in conflict with each other, but these two pairs are in conflict with the other pair. So that's a very complicated structure. Too complicated, it turned out, for Hollywood. However, it was a really good script, and it was picked up by a company, and I'll talk about it sometime in more detail, but the point is they said, we really love this, but we can't get our heads around this structure. It's just not working. And I tried a bunch of different things. I did a lot of rewrites with them. And then eventually I realized that the answer was I had to simplify the structure. And I combined two of the characters. So we went from this, which is that there was these two pairs. I took the middle two characters. I took the guy who was helping this woman, the schizophrenic woman, and the guy who had accidentally shot his lover, and I combined them into one person. So that becomes a much clearer structure for Hollywood's sake. Both structures worked, as far as I'm concerned, creatively, but I could not get the more complicated structure through the business, even with a lot of support within the business. You know, there were people who were involved who were major players, but they just could not get it to go. Those are two absolutely valid versions of the same story. It taught me a lot about how much you can change and maintain. For me, the important thing was these characters. And the problem was I am artistically open to a complex structure with in-depth portraits of more than the regular number of characters. I couldn't get it going, so I rethought the main tensions and I got rid of one. Is that wrong? No, it's fine. It was a good choice. I was glad I did it. It didn't get made, but it didn't matter. I think I got it right in that sense. So the main thing I just want to say about this is everything you do when you are making creative choices is a choice. In other words, there is not a right or wrong. There is a choice. I could choose to do my more complex story, but I was unlikely to get a big budget. I could have gone for a smaller indie film production, and I might have even found some support for that. I chose to stick with, I was working with a big Hollywood company, and it was really cool, and I was like, I'm too excited by that to not do it. That's a choice. It's not like one or the other is right. It's not like one or the other is inevitable. People always talk about, we got it right, we got it to work. No, they made choices, and every choice has a price. You are going to lose something with every choice you make. The important thing is for you to establish the value of those things you are choosing and say, this one is worth not doing the project rather than give it up. That seems extreme, but that happens a lot. Somebody will say, we'll let you make this movie, but you got to get rid of the fact that it's about that type of person. You're like, no, it's not worth it. I would rather not make it. Anyway, that's my basic vision here is if you are changing things, you will feel the right choice to a certain extent. You will feel, you will balance reason and you will balance feeling and reason, but at a certain point, you will feel it is worth making the choice. You will be okay to let something go. You will be okay to rethink it in a new way. And when you feel that okay, even if it's just a little bit, and it's an okay that's shadowed by fear or guilt or whatever else you're shadowed by, recognize that core of feeling of like, you know what, I can live with this. That's the way you decide. Okay, let me check some comments here. Not giving up if the story or the feeling that really got something, that keeps me going. Yes, indeed. Side note, before giving up on a project, maybe start it over. Yes, exactly. That's part of the process, may be rethinking it and trying different things. Matthew, I'm going to get to your question in a minute. If I'm going to run down and just see. Okay. Leonard and Burgundy were talking about maybe in a more general way. Maybe the USP of your story is that you are the first. I don't know. Anyways. Okay, sorry. That one I'm confused by. I lost track of that conversation. Let me just quickly. I'm doing some quick scans of all these comments to just get to the ones on this topic, because then we're going to change topics. Nathan, the tests worked. You are here. Okay. Burgundy, Leonard, what are you? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this as far as Leonard's original question, what if someone's already said it or says the same thing before you get done? That may sometimes be a reason for a company not to make a project, but if you really love what you're saying, if you love what you're doing, keep doing it. Maybe see if there's an alternative venue in which it can be presented. There's not just one way to do things. And if you feel like you're like, there have been 1,000 film noirs, and yet we still manage to have them happen. Many of them with the same plot. Many things are remakes of other things. That's okay. I've been working on one project for almost 4 years. 4 or 7. I'm still excited about it daily, but I decided to do some other writing on the side just to flex your muscles. The answer is great. My answer is yes. Sometimes you set things aside or balance them with other things as a way to keep going on a long, difficult journey. Excellent. I am all right. Lake has got an adult drama about someone with superpower that hates her own power. Set aside for now. I really want to get it finished, but the topic is highly controversial and not mine. Yes. Obviously, once again, everything is a choice. If you've got an idea that you really love, but you recognize that for whatever reason, it is going to be difficult to get through the business or through the world, find a method, find an artistic venue where you can either put it out by yourself and not worry about it, just do it and see what you can do to publicize it, or see if there's a venue, there's a small publisher who would publish it as a book. Or, like I said, make it into a video game or an audio podcast. Who knows? There may be other ways. The big studios, the big networks, they have very strict and narrow needs. And therefore, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to think of that's not going to be for them. That doesn't mean it's wrong to do. Okay. Continued from the last chat is, I don't want to hurt my aunt, a good reason to give up on an idea. Okay, this is a great question. If you fear that the thing that you are doing will hurt someone you know, let's think about that, because the answer is, first of all, is there any way to do it that won't hurt them? To disguise it in such a way that it won't be recognizable. Otherwise, you have to think, why did I think of it and think it was good before I realized it would hurt so-and-so? And the answer may be that you want to say something that you want to say. And you may need to talk to the aunt privately, but continue to do your work. It depends. It depends on the exact circumstances, but the answer will be, is there a way to make it so that it does the thing you like, but doesn't directly hurt that person, is not recognizable? If it is going to hurt that person, is it worth trying to talk to that person about it, see how they feel about that? I don't know. But the answer is, truly, if you genuinely believe that it would hurt them, and you thought of this thing, try not to get too far into it before you realize it would hurt them. Probably, if you think about it, the second you thought of the idea, you thought it could hurt that person. Yes, if it's that important to you, don't do it. That is a fair reason not to do something. Not 7 and. Got it. Okay, all right. Yes, I'll put that on a t-shirt. Fear is a terrible reason to make decisions. That's why I keep emphasizing choice, because if you think about choice, it means I'm saying, okay, I'm afraid of this and I am willing to do this. I'll choose not to do the thing I'm afraid of. That's more legitimate than I want to do this, but I'm afraid, so I won't. That's a different choice. Recognize that it's a choice. Okay. To keeping it just in case, finished, edited, and published 2 books I started. Exactly. You never know. Sometimes, and I have a book, and this is true. I have a novel. The only other novel I've ever written, I wrote back in 1989. And it's about 1980. It's about the 1980s. And I couldn't get it published at the time. And I set it aside. And when I have written my new novel, I am going to publish or self-publish or get published that old novel because, yeah, it was. I still think it was good. You never know. Don't give up on things. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm going to just try and get to these comments. It's really reassuring to you because you're experienced on this topic. Yay, I'm glad. My point here is to reassure, is to offer the whole purpose of this whole extravaganza of YouTubing for me is for years and years and years, I was like talking to myself about these problems. And the things that I am telling you are the things I came to that let me continue or helped me work. And so I kind of want to talk about that. I kind of want to pass that on because partly it's really fun when you can say to someone, you know, that thing that you're just like so caught up on, think of it this way. And they'll go like, oh, wow, that helps. It's like, that's the greatest feeling. Okay. Ideas changing. With my current project, I said up front it wouldn't have time travel because I hate time travel. Well, the time travel is because, yeah, you don't always know. You do not always know. It works, and I love it this way much better, Sonia says. Good. Okay. So, if you do decide to quit, you can ask yourself what you learned from trying. Yes, that gets into the whole question of why you are letting something go. I don't like to say quit. I don't like to say give up. If possible, let's talk about letting go of a project. It could be that simply you learned faster than it could accommodate. That by the time you were halfway through it, you had learned enough that you were ready to move on to a project that was more suited to your new abilities. That often happens. That's okay. So yeah, then ask yourself, what did I get from this? And maybe all I needed was the stuff I got from writing half of it. Okay. Anonymous. Hi. Quick question as a completely failing artist. Is it worth it? Is it worth eating shit, sacrificing the chance of a normal, stable life? Here's my point. Why? First of all, what do you mean by failing? You're not failing if you're completing artworks, which gets back to this whole point. If you are completing artworks and not selling them to the highest, most competitive marketplace that exists on earth, that's not failing. That's just being an artist. I was a working screenwriter for 25 years. All of my original scripts that I wrote during that, of them, I wrote like 12 original scripts while I was doing jobs and being a professional screenwriter. None of them got made. None of them got sold. Okay, 2 of them did. 10 didn't. Am I a failure? No, because I succeeded with 2. Suppose I hadn't succeeded with those 2. Would those all be bad? No. The answer is, if you are considering yourself a failing artist because you are only selling at street fairs or self-publishing, that's not. You might consider finding an art form that you feel more easily represents you without being bogged down in a business. Okay? If you are failing because you actually don't get things done, please watch all of my videos. That's what I'm here for. I am here to try and say to you, stop all the self-destructive things that you might do to not complete your work. It is far better to complete a work and have only a handful of people see it, or have nobody like it. That's still better than not finishing it. So that's my first answer. My second answer is you don't have to sacrifice having a normal, stable life. Sometimes you have to figure out how to do your art while you have a life. That's really, really important. It is really, really important to find a way to have a sustainable, happy existence while you do art. The art may not pay. Most art doesn't pay. If you write flute sonatas for classical music, you're not going to get paid for that. If you write poetry, you're not going to make a living as a poet. The fact that we happen to do something where some people make a living has confused the issue, which is, don't do art to make a living. Yes, it would be nice not to lose money, but if it takes you 5 years to write a play and it gets put on by a community college and they do 2 performances. That's not failing. That's good. Enjoy that. It's okay. However, if you are holding off on your life, if you're saying, I can't do this because I can't get married until I am a famous author, don't do that. Just live your life. Figure out a place in that life to do a little work, ideally every day. I do a lot of videos about all of this. I urge you, please take a look at the first 3 playlists on my channel, especially the one called The Bottom of the 3, The Process or Being a Writer. A lot of stuff about this topic. Okay. I was cleaning out my dad's storage. I found his hobbies and my emotional feelings clicked. Through a metaphor, I found a story. Yes. Also, hobbies. People are allowed to pursue things that don't make them money. What kind of shirt? Yeah, your basic no pocket t-shirt. You're talking about what I would put on a t-shirt. Please speak on a movie like Once Upon a Time. I cannot, and I cannot because you might want to check a couple of weeks ago I did a video on why I do not analyze other movies, and I'm going to put a link to that down in the description. But the answer is I really try not to get into critiquing existing works. I want to talk about the process of writing things that don't exist yet. Combining ideas is a really valuable storytelling tool. So it can simplify as well as improve the pace of a story. Absolutely. This is true. Thank you, Adam Lum. I just appreciate it. Okay. I work 1 week on my game production projects and then move to the next project. After a few weeks, I'm able to recognize the good stuff. Yeah, exactly. Everyone will have their own process for doing that. Some people, sometimes you'll be like, I can't even begin to know whether this is good or not. Sometimes you have to actually write it to know if it's good. That's part of being an artist. You get sort of comfortable with that. You have to learn to be comfortable with the idea that you do it and you then have a process by which you judge its worth or its path. Is it okay to write a true story involving family but using real names? However, the parents of the minors in the book object to the... No, it is definitely not. It's not okay. Do not write about true people using their real names. Just unless you have, unless they are historical people who are dead and cannot voice their opinion, and even then, I would say unless you are writing historical fiction, do not write about real people and use their names. There's just no good reason to do that. Make stuff up. Take the essence of what they are like and make up a new person in a different world that won't be recognizable. And I don't mean different world like, science fiction. I mean just like change it enough to make it something else. No, not in my opinion, no. There's no good reason to do that. It's not like they're famous. It's not like people are like, oh, I want to read about that family. If you want to say this is a novel that's based on a true story, consider what the value is of that. What's the point? People don't need that to get involved. Make your story work without that. The person objecting is her son, doesn't want to... No, don't put anybody's names. No. If it's a biography about her brother and she is this... You get into the question of memoir, and I would say if this is a memoir, if this is a story about true people that is being told as a true story, I don't know much about that field, but I would suggest researching that, the legal and emotional issues. There's going to be a lot of memoirists who talk about that and about the value or the worth of that. Look into that. I'm not somebody qualified to talk about that. If you're talking about fiction, if you're talking about making up a story, then don't use real people's names. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, basically, just to settle that issue is if it is a memoir or a biography of a relative, which is a memoir, frankly, if you are writing for some reason, then that's in the subject. That's in the variety of nonfiction, and I don't do that, so I don't know the rules. Okay. Yes. Think of a sale as a nice bonus, not an expectation. Okay, everyone's talking about Nacho's problem. Okay. Ricky has an interesting thought that I'm going to enjoy ending soon from. Watching a lot of bad movies and have found some gems. There's so much unrecognized creativity out there. If we should driven to it, we should try. This is key. This is fabulous. Think about this. The truth is, A, you have no idea how hard it is to create art until you've done a lot of it. You are not bad for feeling it is hard. It is hard. That's okay. It's also cool and fun and gratifying. So allow it to be hard, but also when you are judging other people's work, please recognize how hard it was to make even a bad thing. Also recognize that there are many things which are in many ways bad that will have good within them. Nothing is all good or all bad. And that is, so when you are working and you are making something, you're like, I don't know if this is good, do the best you can and recognize that even if it's something that's but then there's a couple of good things in it, that's a start. That's a valuable thing. That is how everybody works. And then ideally, you keep doing it, you'll get better. Okay, gotta go write something. Okay. All right. So we had a couple of questions that I sort of skipped over. Let me go back. Let's see if I can find this. Matthew asked, sometimes instead of giving a character dialogue, it's better to describe body language in order to make a point. But a lot of actors don't like to be told how to act. What's the solution? The solution is simple. If you are describing body language and it is a dramatic choice, an action that the character is taking, then the actor will not mind because they will understand that you are describing what they are doing, not how they should be. And that if their body language is they cross their arms, they may choose not to cross their arms, but they will understand the intention. They may they may decide to walk away and light a cigarette. Doesn't matter. You don't need them to cross their arms. You need to think about what the dramatic action is. And I did a whole video on that. So let's show you that. I will put a link to this. Hold on. Boom. Here it is. Okay, dramatic action. Please take a look at that for the answer to this, which is the point is you should be writing what the character is doing because they are having a need in the moment. If you do that, then you are not describing body language or telling someone how to act. You're talking about what the person is doing. And when people are doing things, actors love it. They love to do. That's what they like. Okay, next question that I skipped was, I have a possible future project which challenges human hypocrisy. Inspired by my life experience, many plot scenes will be added from real events. My fear is, what if this story hurts people? Okay, Yuli, I got it. We talked about that a little before. My answer would be, find a mask for it. Find an unrecognizable version that allows you to talk about your aunt or something in such a way that your aunt won't know it's her or won't care. If you feel like your aunt can't handle it, that's really the best I can come up with. Okay, so let us get to, as Ricky says, cheers everyone, keep writing. My version of that, as many of you know, is I hope that you will go write something.